So we finished our episode last week looking at God as our rock and walking through 2 Samuel 22, looking at the great descriptive words that David uses as he experienced God in a very personal way. We're going to break away from that just for 3 episodes and kind of interject a couple thoughts. We're going to come right back to that, but on today's episode, we're going to focus on this. Stop comparing yourself. Now, as we live in our culture today, we have many products and many services that are offered to us. And if you're like me, you can begin to research and compare those products and those services to ensure that you're getting the best product at the best price. And my son gives me a hard time often. He says, "You're just researching it to death. Stop researching and just buy it, Dad." And I'm very guilty of that because we have access on our phones to any company. We can look at their products. We can compare. Even within the same product, many times you have different levels of the product. And so if you're going to go buy a computer, what manufacturer are you going to buy? Then from there, which style of computer, and then which one, how the level, you got to have certain features, certain technical aspects that'll come up. And you can go on a manufacturer's website and you can line up 2, 3, 4 products side by side, and you can begin to list out all those features so that you can choose the right one. Now, this type of comparison can be positive because you can ensure that you're getting the best product that's going to fit your needs at the best price. It also can be negative because you can research stuff till literally you research it to death, and it's a lot of wasted time. As we begin researching stuff or comparing stuff, that can move over into our personal lives, where we begin to compare ourselves with other people. Now, this can be positive in the aspect of us comparing ourselves with somebody who is a role model or a mentor to glean certain aspects from their life. But many times the comparison of ourselves to others takes on a negative aspect, because we can begin to measure ourselves against other people, and it can do one of 2 things, which we'll talk about a little more in detail, but it can produce pride, boastfulness, because we think we're better than, or on the flip side of that, it can produce the feeling of guilt, inadequacy, because we feel less than. And so when we begin to measure ourselves against other people, it can be detrimental in our lives if we're not careful. Now, Paul wrote to the Corinthians, and he said this in 2 Corinthians chapter number 10, verse number 12, "We dare not make ourselves of the number, or compare ourselves with some that commend themselves. But they, measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves among themselves, are not wise." And so Paul was dealing here with a group of people who, because they were measuring themselves amongst themselves, they were beginning to get very boastful and prideful in their thinking. And he tells us, when you begin to compare yourself with other people, he says here, this is not wise. And so comparing ourselves to other people can be very detrimental in our lives. And why is that? I want to give you 2 points on today's episode. The first one is this: comparing yourself breeds guilt. Comparing yourself with others breeds guilt. Why is that? When we begin to compare ourselves with others, I said it can go one of 2 ways. It can produce pride, boastfulness, arrogancy, or on the flip side, and I feel this is probably the majority of the time it does this, it gives us the feeling of being inadequate. Now, how many times have you scrolled through social media and you see the posts, you see the people, the situations, the great things they've done, and you walk away feeling this: I can't do that, or I don't look as pretty as she, or I don't look as good as him, or I don't have that car, I wasn't able to go on that vacation, I don't have that kind of money, I can't do that at work, I can't do that. You begin to feel very inadequate. Maybe it's with a friend, maybe it's just in your neighborhood. You see people's possessions or what they have going on. Many times all we see, though, is the highlight reel through our social media or even in people's lives. It's quick snapshots of what they want you to see, because that's all people ever really want you to know is what they want you to know. They don't reveal all of it, but we see that in our lives, and it can make us feel very inadequate. We can walk away thinking this: why am I not doing that? Why don't I do it like she does or like he does? I can't do that. They are so gifted. I don't have those gifts. I wasn't gifted that way. I'm not as smart. I'm not as pretty. Or I should be doing this in my life. I mean, how many times have you walked away from a situation or a post as a mom and you begin to feel very guilty because I don't do that with my children, or I don't do it like that, or as a dad, or even as a boyfriend or classmate or whatever it is, you begin to feel like because of how they are doing it or what they're doing, that you you are just very inadequate. And so the comparison begins to make us feel very inadequate and produces this idea or this real strong feeling of guilt. You see, all that runs this way, the feeling of I'm not good enough. I'm not a good enough wife or a mom. I'm not a good enough employee. I'm not a good enough Christian. I'm just not good enough. Why? Why can't I do that? I'm a failure is where it can lead to many times. And so comparison produces guilt, and the guilt begins to do this. Secondly, to hinder our growth. So comparing ourselves can also hinder our growth in our life. Now, the problem is this: as we're comparing ourselves with other people are the incorrect measurement to compare ourselves to. And that's where the problem comes in. You see, when we compare ourselves with other people, we're not comparing ourselves against the correct measurement. So the problem that comes in, one of two things happen. We mentioned earlier. Either one, you'll begin to feel prideful and arrogant because you feel you are better than that person, which is going to hinder your growth because God resists the proud. Pride is a major sin issue that can come into our lives and lead us astray and lead us in all different ways. Or on the flip side, we can get angry. We can get frustrated. We talked about we can feel inadequate. We feel ashamed. We feel guilt-ridden. You see, the incorrect measurement hinders growth, whether it's pride, arrogance, whether it's guilt or inadequacy. Measuring ourselves with the incorrect measurement hinders our ability to grow like God desires for you to grow. So the question is, what is the correct measurement that you and I should measure ourselves with? So surely we have to have some measurement stick to know if we're doing right, we're doing wrong. Well, the only thing or person you can measure yourself or should measure yourself with is yourself. You see, only measure yourself against the correct measurement, and that measurement is yourself and Jesus Christ. You see, the measurement is who you were created to be, not what she or he was created to be, because they're unique. They're gifted uniquely. They have different circumstances, different opportunities, everything. And so you're not, when you compare yourself with that person, it's an inaccurate measurement because you weren't created to be them. You weren't created with those gifts. You were not created to have those circumstances or those opportunities. And so there's no way for you to accurately compare yourself. And then second, God is not comparing you with them. That is not the measurement in His eyes of your success. It's not the measurement of your identity in His eyes. And so the measurement should be of who God created you to be. And the question is, are you or am I being the person that God made me to be? Am I or are you striving to be the best you that you can be with the help of the Holy Spirit? You see, it's our Creator that you and I will stand before to give an account of our lives. And we're not going to give an account of our lives in comparison to so-and-so. We're going to give an account of our lives in comparison to who God created us to be, how we use the gifts and talents that He gave us, how we utilize the opportunities and the circumstances that He allowed to come into our lives. That's what we will be measured by, not against that person, that friend, that neighbor. Can I say this to you? You were made to stand out. You were created to stand out, to be different. Oftentimes we think of that as being a negative asset. Being the oddball out, right? That's kind of a negative descriptor. But you were not made to be like anyone else, period, point blank. That's not how God created you. So you can't compare, and I can't compare myself with and against other people because I was not made to be like them. You were not created to be better than or less than other people. You were not created to compare yourself with their gifts, their unique abilities or talents or anything like that. And so when you and I can come to realize this truth, that you and I are not created to compare ourselves, that we are created unique, we're created to stand out in this world, that we don't compare ourselves. And if we can grab this truth and kind of embrace it, it will help us to get rid of that guilt that hinders us. Because I don't know how many times I walk away from people or situations, and when that comparison comes in, so many times I'll walk away feeling guilty. I don't feel adequate. I don't feel like I measure up. And so it hinders me from moving forward, from taking my next step. It hinders me from growing. And so if we can embrace this truth that you and I were not created to compare ourselves, we were created to measure ourselves really against ourselves and against who God created us to be, it will help us to get rid of that guilt. It will help us to then grow and to flourish in life.